Hi, my name is Willie Downs with The Journey, and today I'm here with Clinton Haby with StoryKeeping, and he has a really fascinating story, and what he's able to do for a living is super cool. He's actually a legacy filmmaker, and I know a lot of people may have no idea what that is. So, Clinton, why don't you shed a little bit of light into what you do exactly?
Yeah, the way that I've been able to voice it where people understand it is, I help to capture people's legacy. And so most often it's people hiring me to interview their parents or their grandparents, and I'm capturing their earliest memories up through the present day with their character and their values and all those pivotal points in their lives that influence them to get to where they are today. That's my job, is to guide them through that process, make it as easy as possible, and on the back end, produce something that's really beautiful and just absolutely nails who that person is and what they love and what they care about. So it's been one heck of a journey. So
Well, that's incredible. I mean, I know I have a soft spot for that whole thing there. My grandpa had dementia, and when I found out he got the diagnosis, I went and sat down with him for a couple hours, several hours, and videoed his story. And so I know I have a special spot in my heart for what you do. I think it's amazing work. So. Um, to give us kind of a brief overview of your filmmaking journey, tell us a little bit about from where you started to where you are today.
right, so I'm a little bit of an accidental filmmaker because I didn't seek out thinking that I was going to do anything with filmmaking when I started story keeping, because I had worked in radio my first job out of college, and I was an account executive, and basically what that means is I would put together marketing campaigns. I would write the ad copy. The production guys upstairs at Clear Channel were sick of listening to their own voices, so they would get me to come upstairs and voice things for them. So I was super familiar with audio, and when I guess to back up a little bit, as a kid, um, my father has an automotive shop, Haby's Automotive, and so I would work with him. If I wasn't in school or something like that, I was helping dad. I was raised that you're supposed to help your family, right? And so I always worked in my dad's shop, and on the weekends we would often go to my grandpa's ranch. And during deer hunting season here in Texas, you're out there at the ranch every weekend in the fall. And so being raised the way that I was, where, you respect your elders and you listen when they speak, I really idolized my grandparents. And my grandfather, in particular, with his deer hunting stories, and not just deer hunting stories, but he would actually put an ad in the local paper where people could call him if they had winged deer, which back in the day, they didn't have the high powered scopes and stuff like that they do now, and people weren't as accurate. And, so he would get phone calls quite often, where he would take his dogs out in the night and be chasing white-tailed deer all across Medina County in Texas. And so his stories are incredible. And, that generation, they didn't grow up in front of computers, and they didn't have social media. And the art of storytelling is uniquely strong with that generation. And so I just loved my grandparents' stories. Understood that me retelling them was a complete train wreck and a complete disservice to their stories. And so I had this epiphany when I was telling one of my grandpa's deer chasing stories to a couple of my buddies. They were totally disinterested in what I had to say. And, you know, I realized that there is nothing better than listening to someone's story from them. The power of the first person perspective, the energy in their eyes, that's something that you just can't replace telling somebody else's story. And so I realized, I need to record my grandparents' stories myself if I'm ever going to be able to retain this. I was taught as a little kid to listen to them. But how are you supposed to be able to listen to them after they're gone unless you actually record them? And I wanted that for myself. And when I realized that, you know what, I'm probably not the only kid that loves their grandparents, I set out on this journey to figure out how to turn this into something that was a service for other people so that I could do it for others. Because I loved what I was able to create for myself. But because I had this background in audio, I just thought I was going to be recording people with this Olympus digital voice recorder for the rest of my career. And I had so many people telling me, you know what, I love the concept of what you're doing, but I really want to see, you know, the look in my dad's eye when he tells that story. Or, you know, my grandmother, she's Italian, she talks with her hands, and like that's part of her vibe, and I really want you to capture that too. So can't you just do it on video? And so yeah, I mean, I started StoryKeeping Cinco de Mayo of 2009, and by 2010 I was using cameras. So it's been a journey since then to get better and up the game, but it's been a lot of it's been a journey.
But what rewarding work that you're able to do, you know, starting with your grandparents and then now being able to help people tell their own stories and capture those memories of their grandparents. I mean, that's such a rewarding thing. I'm sure that's got to make an impact on you. Um,
No, I mean, I learn something from everyone I listen to, right? And you know, I think that this is maybe worth mentioning as well. But in me telling my buddies my grandpa's story happened around the same time in early 2009, where if you can recall, the economy was not great at that point, and so the company that I was working for just got rid of all of their regional people. I was one of their regional people, and so I I had always wanted to do my own thing, you know, watching my parents with their automotive shop and the way that they were able to interface with their customers. And you know, the buck stops there, right? Here I go with another whitetail thing. It's a buck. That was punny. I'm sorry. It's the dollar, right? The dollar is the buck. But if my parents told a customer that they were going to get someone's car finished by this date and that they were going to do it right, it was up to them to make that happen. And I remember when I worked in radio, I would be interfacing with clients and I would tell them, you know, my best estimate of what we're able to deliver. But there are a lot of moving parts when you're working with radio production. And sometimes what I said to my clients did not come true. And I remember feeling like, you know, I have to do my own thing at some point where I am in control and I can make sure that anything that I tell the people that I serve is going to come true. And so I knew that I wanted to do my own thing, but I didn't know what it was going to be. But after I was laid off in early 2009, it was like the clouds parted and the sun shone down upon my face, and it was God was telling me, "All right, now is the time. Quit putting this off. This is what you're supposed to do." And I guess I've always had my friends, you know, pick up the phone and tell me their problems, and people innately want to divulge personal details to me regardless of what I do. And so I was thinking about what am I good at? How can I take all of these different skills that I've accumulated up to this point, and what do I actually love and what do I care about? What would make a difference on this planet? And all of that combined, this recipe resulted in story keeping. So, and that started the journey. Like you said, you know, what even got you into video in the first place? Well, it was listening to clients and trying to make their dream come true, right? So,
you
anyway,
know
I
what I
could
think
keep
is,
going.
yeah, you know what I think is fascinating about that. It sounds like, I mean, you came at this from a perspective of, you know, you wanted to tell those stories, preserve those stories, not necessarily from a filmmaking perspective. So did you have any technical skills, any filmmaking skills at all at that point?
I think that I think that to be a good filmmaker, you have to have a heart for it, and you have to have a passion for it as well. And it's funny that I didn't initially intend to set out to be a filmmaker, but there are a lot of things, I think, in my life and maybe even in my soul that play into making me a better filmmaker. One thing that I think is innately inside of me is empathy, right? And I think you have to have empathy for your character, um, if you're going to serve that character well, and if you're going to tell that character story well, you need to be able to put yourself in that person's shoes so that you understand how they think and how they feel. And that's a huge part of legacy films, is you want to honor that person and that storyteller, and to deliver on their spirit, right? Because if I don't do that, then number one, it's going to be insulting to the storyteller. But number two, it's oftentimes, their kids or grandkids that are hiring me, and I want them to completely recognize 100%, who that person is. I want them to feel like they were in the living room and a part of that conversation.
So every filmmaker, in their pursuit of what they're trying to accomplish, they they face numerous challenges along the way. Could you discuss a significant obstacle that you've encountered that you've managed to overcome?
um, so many hurdles, not setting out to be a filmmaker in the first place, and learning a lot of things. I will say, when I was a kid, my parents did have a Sony. I honestly, I don't even remember what media it used, but it was a little mini cassette. Um, and I used to run around with that and make videos with it. But since launching StoryKeeping, one of the challenges that was thrown into my lap early on, I had a client who asked me if I could do a multi-camera shoot, which initially I thought, you know what, I'm going to use a single camera and I'm going to zoom in and out throughout the interview. And that way I'll be able to deliver a multitude of framing options. And that I have not done a single camera shoot since I introduced a second camera. But I had a client ask me, hey, can you do a multi-camera shoot? And I was like, yes. I didn't know how. I didn't know how at all. I'd never done it before. But, the I guess it was maybe me watching my parents and the way that they dealt with their customers historically. You know, you figure out a way, and I did. And ever since then, if a client asks me if I can do something, I don't always instantaneously say yes. It depends on what the ask is, but I'm never going to say no. I'm at least going to say that I'll try. And so I set out. I purchased a second camera that would match my first camera, and then I had to watch all these tutorials on how to match up the two camera angles, because if they don't match up, it's a train wreck and nobody wants to watch it. And there's a litany of challenges when it comes to filmmaking, but once you figure something out, then you got that in your belt now, and it's on to the next thing. And it's been a over 14-year journey of adding adding skills, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you hear it all the time that it's oftentimes fear that keeps you from trying something. And had you not tried, or had you told all those customers no because you didn't think you could do it, I mean, just think about where you would have been today. I mean, it's being willing to say yes and see where that takes you. So,
No, I
so
mean, if I did not try to make my clients' dreams come true, I would be a fraction of the filmmaker I am today. It would be a freaking shame, and I would be shocked if I was still in business. So,
So, has there ever been a specific moment or project where you've maybe felt like giving up, like it was just you hit your max, and if so, what motivated you to keep pushing forward?
Man, I want to give up all the time. Are you kidding? I on this Alsatian language preservation production that I'm working on, it just yesterday, I was tweaking the captions, and of course, if the captions aren't on, then nobody is ever going to understand what these, 12 Alsatian language speaking people ever said, because they're the only people on the planet that understand what they said. And so I tweaked the caption in the software, and when I tweaked the caption in the software, it ended up dragging a single camera angle along the timeline, and I have no idea. It makes no sense. Why, Adobe, would you ever do me dirty like that? I have no clue. But it did. And I didn't instantaneously understand how to fix it, and so I had to walk away. I walked away from the computer because I was already frustrated, because it's super difficult to edit foreign language film by caption only, especially when you have 3 camera angles that you're toggling between. It's some super high level stuff that I never would have dreamt I would be working on historically, right? But here I am. And it's not like every production that I work on, it throws something in my lap where I want to quit. But what keeps you from quitting? It's understanding that the work that you're working on is super important, and that there are people counting on you. And it's not only just the storyteller. It's not just their kids and grandkids. The work that I'm doing, I'm working on it with a mindset that it's sacred, and that future generations are going to want to be consuming this, so that they understand where they come from. Because we come from, we're influenced by our parents, obviously. We're influenced by our grandparents. If you were fortunate enough to know your great grandparents, then God bless America, you're super fortunate, and they influenced you. But where do you think they got their values from? And why did they even end up in Texas, right? Or wherever it is that you're from? Those things, when people understand where they come from, they understand who they are. And if you understand who you are, you're well grounded, and you know what you're capable of becoming in the future, right? So it all ties in together into this super meaningful work, or at least I feel it's super meaningful work. My clients do too, because they're paying me to do it. That I'm obligated on a super high and super deep level, to do my best on every production that I'm involved in. Right? Like, I owe it to a lot of people.
Let's go back to this foreign language project that you're working on. For those that maybe they're not familiar with what you're doing, tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, so my last name is Haby, and Haby it's an Alsatian name, and Alsatian means it's this area of France. It's currently France. It's been a part of Germany historically. It's right on the border. And so it got flip-flopped between French and German. But Alsatian is also a language. It's a dialect, right? Where the people that came to Texas in the 1840s, it was like 1842 or 1843 is when my Haby ancestry came to Texas. They settled west of San Antonio in a small town called Castroville. And so those people, they were farmers, and they were promised land if they would come from Alsace to Texas to help to populate the state. Because back then that area was, it was wild, right? It was the Wild West. And so they ended up coming to Texas, helping to found the town of Castroville, and they spoke the Alsatian language. But what ends up happening over time is, you're going to English language schools. And, it's the same thing that happens with, immigrants from any other country. You assimilate. And so it was a handful of us who are descendants of these Alsatian immigrants were realizing that the language is disappearing. And so we cast a net across Medina County, that area. It's not just Castroville. There were multiple towns in that area that they settled in. They cast a net, and they came back with, well, we thought it was going to be over 30 people. We were able to find 12, which kind of exclaimed the importance of this production. So we ended up setting up shop. I had 3 cameras. I had all kind of lighting. Added cinematographer Mason Hunsicker. He operated the second camera. We threw everything production quality wise that we could at this thing because we understood how important it was. And so over the course of a couple days, we prompted these people to engage in conversations in Alsatian so that future generations of people could not just hear it, but actually experience it and see it and, see this, see our ancestry come to life. And so that was that project, right? And we filmed it in February of last year. And I'm still working on it today. And basically I knew going in, I was probably the only person in that group that understood the heavy lift that this project was. But what they ended up having to do is sit down with the actual storytellers to create the captions for the content so that I would actually be able to understand what they were saying so that I could edit it and make the cuts and turn it into stories that people could learn from. And so people didn't really know what they were getting into in the first place. And if they had understood, maybe we wouldn't even be here today. We could just let it sail. But no, it was super important. And so it's involved a lot of people, a lot of time. And I was talking to my friend Josh, who was one of those handful of people in the first place that were kind of kicking this thing around of like, what does this need to be? And in the downtown area of Castroville, they have recently remodeled the Rainbow Theater that was shut down for decades, recently reopened. And this Alsatian language preservation production is going to end up premiering at this historic downtown theater in Castroville. And so it's going to be a beautiful poetic moment when that happens. But again, that's me. It's me realizing and understanding, that what I'm working on is super important and it's big and it's going to outlive me.
That's incredible. You've talked a lot about the collaboration with these different people, and I know filmmaking is a very collaborative process. So tell me, just elaborate on how that whole process works with you.
So it's funny. It's funny to think about filmmaking being a super collaborative process because I resisted that for a very long time. Because in 2009, when I started StoryKeeping, it was all me. And what I've come to realize is that I can only do so much by myself, right? And so the first thing that I ever did was outsource a little bit of editing. And there has not been a project yet where I haven't been involved in the editing on some level, because all of these productions are still so deeply personal. But I have had some outstanding editors over the past 14 years that have helped me to take this raw storytelling and chop it up into digestible clips, right? Digestible stories. Because a lot of the interviews that I do, you're talking about someone's life. It's not a fast conversation. And I want these people to be super comfortable. I want them in the zone and I want them speaking from the heart and naturally the way that people would recognize them. And so it goes at their pace. And oftentimes, we're filming up to 4 hours of storytelling. So in post, that's a lot of work. A lot of filmmaking is planning in advance what the story is going to be. And when you're doing legacy films properly, you throw that out the window, right? Like you can make an educated guess about what someone's story is going to be. But if you go in there with this preconceived, plot, you are doing a complete disservice to that person. And so a lot of the sculpting of the story happens in post for me in the way that I do legacy films. And so it's a super heavy lift, and it involves a lot of decision making. Thousands of decisions are going into, the cuts that we make. And when I say cuts, sometimes people think, hey, you're leaving some on the cutting room floor, right? Well, we don't. I am of the belief that, even if this small snippet of a story isn't important to the person that hired me, it might be important to another family member, right? And so I package the entirety of the story in a consumable way for my clients. And that's a lot of work. And I think a lot of people don't understand the amount of work that goes into it. But the people that I serve, when they see the final production and they see the freaking archive of stories that I'm delivering to them, they understand. And they're like, wow, this is awesome. And yeah, I mean, that's really what energizes me, is the validation of clients, because then it's recognized. All the hours here, like, people understand, and that's super cool. But okay, but you asked also, the filmmaking being collaborative. Sometimes, okay, so for a legacy film, when I'm filming it, I kick everybody else out, right? Because people tweak their story depending upon who is in the room. And so I think that's one of the benefits of people hiring me, is I'm not I'm not an individual member of the family where they're going to, the storyteller is wearing this hat because they're with this person and they know that this person wants to hear this out of them, or, that this person sees me this way. And so I have to fit this character. We all wear many hats, right? Like we all have like these central values, but the way that we interact can be different. And also, people are never as quiet as they think they are when they're sitting in the room and I'm filming. Plus, when the storyteller is telling a story, if there's a person in the room over here, there's a person in the room over here, their eyes are going back and forth, just it's instinct. It's what we do, but it results in a terrible production because the person doesn't look believable, because they're looking all over the place and like, oh, I can't even trust what this person's saying. It's not the goal. So I end up kicking everybody else out. So if I can do a legacy film by myself, if I can set up the entire thing by myself, I will. The only times that I involve more people in a production on a shoot is if it's a commercial production and we have to move fast. Then guess what? The hundreds and hundreds of pounds of filmmaking gear that I use on my productions, I can't move all of that by myself very fast. So I'll involve a second shooter oftentimes. And honestly, I love doing that, because then I am able to focus on a little bit of a smaller segment of the lift, right? And then it's kind of a surprise in post when I load all of their footage and I get to see what they did, because I know I'm getting great shots, and I know they, even if they don't get anything, then, I'm still covered because I know I'm on it. But it's just like icing on the cake. It's like a nice bonus. So I do enjoy working with other people. A lot of the legacy film work, it actually is solo work when you're filming, right? If that makes any sense. I know that people that are listening to this that are filmmakers are probably shaking their fists like, and involve more people. You can do higher level work, and that's been part of the 14-year journey, is trying to get good at all these different things. It's not a road to riches at all, trying to be an expert in everything, right? It's really slow. It's very slow, but
So
the end product, right? That's what it's all about.
So let's talk about persistence. So that's obviously something that's very pivotal on achieving success. So, can you share a time where determination and persistence really made a significant difference in the final outcome of a project or even your career at large?
Okay, so in 2009, the first year that I was in business, I made $0. Like I had zero revenue, right? Like I was living on savings, and I was trying to figure out what story keeping was, you know, which, it was important to me, and that's why I stuck with it. In 2010, I'll say this, until I met my wife in 2013. um I was also like a very hardcore volunteer for my alumni club, and not just the San Antonio A&M club, but also the parent organization, the Association of Former Students. I was super involved in all of that. And so, and actually my local A&M club ended up hiring an executive director with a nice salary, after I had stepped back. So I was like, obviously I was doing some full-time work. But after 2013, I really kicked things up a notch. But the years before that was very slim, right? Like I did not make a lot of money, and I don't like saying that, because I think that, legacy films, it's super important work, but there's a huge mountain to climb when you're working in this area where people have not already been preconditioned to spend money on that, right? Like, I love that you said legacy films right out of the gate. I don't know if you'll be able to rewind that, but like I actually was like, oh yeah, like this is great. Because when I started story keeping in 2009, like nobody had any idea what that was, and I completely had to pioneer my own service, with nothing to model it after, at all, right? I mean, people have been telling stories since the beginning of time, right? But for so long, you know, movies were only made about celebrities or politicians or people that had a ton of money or a ton of success, right? You were never going to walk into Blockbuster Video and see your mom's story on the shelf, right? Like that was never happening. And so, technology being what it was, advances and accessibility and everything kind of converged at the same time, where it actually made sense for someone like me to pick up these different pieces and put them together and create a service out of it. But the pieces were scattered when I found them. It took a very long time to piece them together, and it takes an even longer time to paint the picture for that I have in my head to other people, and for them to trust me to tell the story of someone that they love so much. It was a stretch, I think, for a long time. It's not a stretch anymore. People can see the work that I do, and they understand that I'm good. But to get to that point, persistence, holy cow. It's If I wasn't persistent, we wouldn't be on this podcast right now, right? You would have no idea who I was, because I'd be doing something different. God knows.
Yeah.
God knows what my career would be.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. That's awesome. You definitely had to push through for a few years to see through to what you wanted. You knew what you wanted, and you did what it took to get there. I know a lot of people that doesn't happen. They a year of doing that, and they just said, it's time to move on. But that's incredible that you pushed through, and now you reap the rewards of that. So um, now I know. Legacy filmmaking is a bit different, but I'm assuming at this point, since you started it at this point, it's probably a bit more of a competitive market. Would you say that's the case?
There are other people out there that do work similar to me. There isn't anyone that I've found that does it exactly the way that I do it. Um, I think that I was actually hesitant for a long time to share knowledge, which is like looking back, I'm embarrassed to say that, right? Um, and and there are a lot of people out there that do very meaningful and important work. I think that I've been at it for so long, and I've been reinvesting on so many levels for so long in story keeping that I no longer see it that way. I don't see this as a competitive market. Um, Number one, I've been at it for so long and I've been running so hard. I'm a remotely intelligent person. I have a pretty good work ethic. I have I have a very large lead on anyone that wants to start doing this tomorrow, right? I have a 14-year lead, and I understand because I had to piece everything together like I was talking about. I have a very in-depth understanding of every aspect of the business. And so I don't I don't mind if anyone else on the planet wants to. I want more people to do it because that's more of my competition than anything else, is just the market not understanding that the option is there, right? And I think that the more that people do important work like this, the more the more it normalizes it, and the less you see people have this misconception of, oh, like, I'm not a narcissist, I don't want to talk about myself all the time. That's not what it's about. It's not about you. I might be interviewing you, but it's not for you. It's for your kids and for your grandkids. It's for future generations, right? And so once people have been educated, then everybody wins, right? And so I I actually it's kind of funny timing, but just a couple of days ago was the first time that I ever actually recorded myself editing. And this setup that I have here, I did it with the intention of creating content so that others can learn about what I've built and what I've done, and this service, because I can't film everybody on the planet. But I go outside and, I look at Interstate 10 and I see these thousands of cars driving by, and they all have a story, and they're all worth keeping, right? I can't get to all of them. So I want more people doing this. And if somebody wants it at the highest level that it can possibly be done, call me. If I'm outside of the budget, God bless America, please film it or record it. Even if you don't have a camera, everybody has a camera. Everybody's got the iPhone now. Use your iPhone. Use whatever you can, right? Because everybody needs. I wouldn't say everybody needs, but I feel like even if they don't understand that they want it, there will come a point in time in that person's life where they wish that they had. And I don't want people to be faced with regret of having not recorded somebody that they love, right? Because that hurts. That sucks.
You'd mentioned the possibility of putting. It sounds like maybe some classes or something together, or teaching people. Shed some light on that. Like, what do you hope to put together in the future?
So I have some outlines at this point of the kinds of not just tasks, but knowledge and approaches, and I guess you could say best practices. I have extensive outlines um, about how I put these legacy films together. Um, it's going to be a very heavy lift to execute on all of that. I think that the intelligent thing for me to do is to create very basic do it yourself type content first. And then I know that there will be people out there that will want to know how to do it at a higher level. And, whether I monetize that or not, I'm not sure. I haven't calculated all of that yet. I just know that I know to do it right is going to be a lot of work. And if I've learned anything, over the past 14 plus years of doing story keeping, is you have to be intelligent from a business perspective to make your work sustainable. Because if what you do is not executed in a way that's sustainable, then you're not going to be able to do it long term, and then nobody wins, right? Because if I could do legacy films all day for free, I would do it because it brings me so much joy. But my wife would probably leave me and I would be destitute, and I wouldn't be able to afford the nice cameras and lighting and audio and everything to do it at the level that I do it. So, okay, no brainer. You have to make it sustainable, and you have to have some business sense about you too, which would be yet another aspect of whatever coursework it is that I develop, right? So it's going to be a lot.
I feel like that leads well into the next question, and that is, throughout your journey, what are some key lessons that you've learned about the art and craft of filmmaking, and specifically legacy filmmaking?
Lessons I've learned. I think probably the most important lesson is honesty and sincerity. I think that you have to lead with sincerity in every aspect of filmmaking, because whether I'm engaging with my client, I want my client to understand that I'm sincere about my engagement with them, right? Like if I'm not being straight with someone, they can sense it and they're not going to want to work with me anyway. I have to be sincere with the storyteller right out of the gate to build the rapport and to build the trust to capture the kind of story that I need to be capturing. I need to be sincere with anyone else that I involve in the process, because I really want the people that edit for me to feel like this work is important as I feel it is. Because if they feel the same way that I do, if they can sense, that, then maybe they put their own heart into the work that they're doing. In every aspect of this work, it requires heart. Even editing, even cutting up the content, like, do you cut here? Do you cut there? If you're approaching with heart, do you leave out the part where, like they misspeak or something, or if they look off camera, or, there's just thousands of decisions that you make in every section of it. But I think operating with sincerity is maybe the biggest thing. And it's something that people don't really think about, but it's like a baseline, air, water, food necessity for filmmaking.
So you've been doing this, what has it been, 14 years? Is that right? So 14 years. And as with anything, learning, you never stop learning. You always hear that. For as long as you're doing something, technology is always evolving. Everything is always changing. So you're always learning. So how do you stay ahead of the ball and really continually just teach yourself?
Right. So I guess going back to, what I was taught as a kid, right? You respect your elders and you listen to them. I think that expertise wise, someone can be your elder and they would actually be younger than you. You always have to be looking at what other people do better than you, and pay attention to how they're doing it. And sometimes there's an opportunity for you to hand them money and they will actively take you under their wing and they will teach you. And you can shortcut a lot of banging your head against the wall if you have an opportunity like that. And so I actively look for like courses, whether they're free or if they cost money. Oftentimes, if they cost money, they're worth that money, and they will save you years of heartache, because you're able to take that knowledge and then leap forward that length of time that it took that person to learn it, right? And so, I read forums, I watch YouTube, I subscribe to, you know, multiple courses that are paid, and in different areas too. It's not just about filmmaking, it's about dealing with people and understanding how people work. And so I love psychology and, you know, self-improvement books and that kind of stuff, that I was reading those in middle school, and so a lot of it is just understanding how to engage with people in the first place, and then just learning. Like, obviously you said it, you never stop learning, but it comes everywhere. It can surprise you where it comes from, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where we live in such a unique time in history. I mean, I think, what do they call it? The information age. I mean, you have, as you mentioned, YouTube, online courses. It's no longer just books. I mean, you have access to so many different resources now to be able to refine skills that at one point you'd have to go to a, expensive university to learn these skills, and now it's just at your fingertips. So it's a really unique opportunity for people to do that. So, um,
Well, that's great, and it also is terrible, right? Well, the problem right now is that there's so much information out there, you don't know what's good and you don't know what's bad. And now you
yeah,
have AI that is pulling from a wealth of information that may be good and may be bad, and then delivering it to you on a silver platter. And you're only going to get as good of information as what ChatGPT scraped from, right? So if ChatGPT scraped from a legacy film website that was put up yesterday by somebody that has no idea what they're doing, and then they deliver that content to everybody, that's really not doing anyone any favors. It takes an intelligent mind to decipher, what is true and what is not, and what is helpful and what is not. And I think that will never go out of style. I feel, maybe I'm especially dumb, but I feel like I have some job security because what I do is very high touch, and it's very like active intelligence, not artificial intelligence. So anyway, you were about to ask a question. I'm sorry.
no, that's a great perspective, and completely agree. AI it's definitely new technology, but I know it's you can't replace the human touch and the human mind and human creativity. I mean, you get away from that, and exactly what you said. Um, so feedback, you get feedback, both positive and negative. I would imagine with legacy films, a lot of that feedback is going to be coming from the client that has hired you. Throughout that creative process. So, how do you approach handling any kind of criticism or negative feedback, and what strategies do you use to grow from that feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I really want my clients to be honest with me, and I'll give you two examples of feedback that I received that helped me to be better. Um, First feedback that I got that I would say was constructive criticism was actually in, I believe it was early 2010, where, or maybe it's 2009, where, no, it was 2010. I was still doing straight audio at that point, and my price point was like poverty level $200 or $300 for a project. And what I was doing is I was recording people with my Olympus digital voice recorder, and I was editing the audio and delivering on CDs. So I had told the client that it was, 250, for example, right? For this 2 or 3 hour interview. And the storyteller ended up telling stories for more like 4 hours. And so it required about double the work. I didn't charge double, but I ended up charging 300 something. And so the client actually didn't even tell me any critique. It was their son, who was a friend of mine, who told me, "Oh, by the way, my parents experienced some sticker shock when they got the invoice from you because they thought it was going to be X, but you delivered this that was more." And so I was like, "Oh man," and it really killed me, because I had worked so hard on this project. I'm early in this business, and I want everyone to love story keeping as much as I do. And um, the big lesson there is, no, you have to set expectations up front. And now I tell people, it's up to 4 hours of storytelling. If we think that the person is going to be a super avid storyteller, we need to entertain the idea of, a second afternoon. And I actively manage the storytelling so that we're able to get what we need to get in that amount of time, right? At one point, I had to tell this retired general that he was taking too long, and that was uncomfortable because he's not used to taking orders. But I was like, I'm actively trying to manage you, sir. Okay, fast forward. Let's see, what was another constructive criticism? Oh, this one was really funny. This was sad, actually. Okay, so I did this legacy film shoot for this woman, absolute doll of a woman. She actually she has like she was friends with my grandmother, and she has this like very, what would you call it, voluminous hair. It's large, right? And like she puts a lot of time into her hair every day, and you can tell. And she looks super cute, like adorable woman. Okay, so we do the shoot. I go through all the editing. It has taken me weeks upon weeks to do this production. I deliver it to her. She's excited about it. She shares it with her sister, and her sister says that her hair does not look good. Number one, what's wrong with your sister, right? Like, what kind of sister is this? Why is she still alive? Why didn't you murder your sister when you were children like you should have? It's like, what do you even do with that? Because it's totally not my fault, right? But I want my clients to love the way that they look. And she did. She spent God knows how long in front of the mirror that morning doing her hair to make it perfect. It looked perfect to me. Her sister didn't think so. We ended up reshooting her interview, and I didn't charge for it. I chalked it up to, this one's for you, Grandma, because this is my grandmother's friend, right? My grandmother, she passed away in 2014, but she was a huge champion of story keeping. She freaking loved it. She told all of her friends about it, which may have led to, me even having that job in the first place. But it's, is that constructive criticism? Telling your sister that her hair sucks probably isn't constructive. But I think the moral of the story there is, if you're going to be successful and a real one-off kind of business, a real one-off kind of service like this, you really have to be ready to go above and beyond for your people, because the industry needs all the help that it can get, and it needs all the advocates that it can get. And so if I can take this woman from not feeling great about the way that she looks to both her and her sister loving her hair and her wanting to share it, it's probably worth that effort to me. So yeah, you have to take care of the people that take care of you.
Yes, that's a sad but also hilarious story. So thank you, thank you for sharing that. Success requires personal development and self-discovery, and ironically, with what you're doing with legacy films, I mean, you're interviewing people about their lives, about their having them capture their legacy on film for their families. And so, how has your filmmaking journey influenced your personal growth and your own perspective on life?
I was speaking to my wife about this maybe a couple weeks ago, but I think that having filmed the number of people that I've filmed, and for them to have opened up to me the way that they have, you can't help but be changed by everyone that you listen to, because you then carry a little piece of them with you as you go. And so I think that my worldview has probably changed a lot since I started story keeping. I think that, I got into this work because I had a huge heart for people, and I think that that has only grown over time. And I'm very hesitant to judge practically anyone now, because everyone that's out there in the world today, they're making decisions based on the context that they're carrying with them. Maybe they have the values that were instilled by their parents and grandparents and great grandparents, but we also have to make this life our own, and we have to hone our brains the best that we can with what we have. And so I think that it's been incredibly rewarding on a personal level to do this work professionally, because I had empathy before, and it's only been multiplied. So not to talk like a big old sissy or anything, but I mean, I find myself listening to people that I don't even know, and being that much closer to tears that much faster, because I understand a little bit better where they're coming from, having listened to somebody else like them, right? So if that makes any sense.
Yeah, wow. I could imagine how that impacts your life. I mean, that's powerful. So, um,
I don't hate it.
I um, I know you're married. You don't have kids,
I don't have
do you?
kids.
No. So filmmaking, I know it can be, or it's a very demanding and time consuming job, as you've already expressed. I mean, it takes a lot of time. How do you maintain a healthy work life balance while also being able to passionately pursue this career that you love?
I think that my work life balance, it's really off trend right now, because if you look on LinkedIn, and you get the boomer, you get the Gen X person saying something like, "Oh, you got to work hard, you got to roll up your sleeves, you got to work overtime." And I think the shark, Barbara Corcoran, was just bashed recently because she gave out some tone deaf advice, to the younger generations of, whatever job you're hired for, do that, and then do more, right? And I think that it is very off trend to not have the work life balance, um, which is it's funny. It's a great question, right? Because I'm oftentimes working into the night, and I'm oftentimes working on weekends. And is that work life balance? Depends who you ask, right? Because I'm the one that's actively choosing to do it. I suck as a boss, right? Because I don't give myself a lot of time off. If I told a client that I would have something done by a certain point in time, and it's not done, I go into overtime, right? To make that true for them. But it's also, I had hinted earlier about sustainability, and if things are not sustainable, then it's not going to last. And so every once in a while, I will take off. And, I did Saturday morning, which, you say Saturday morning, you're supposed to be off Saturday morning, right? Well, I knew that my dad needed some help at my grandpa's ranch. And so I got up extra early Saturday morning so that I could go sit out at the tank. And what do? I bring my cameras. I create more work for myself. But no, like for me, when you're doing something that you love, it's not always like this bludgeoning work, right? You know, I'm out there taking pictures of deer, and you know, a hog walked scarily close to me. That was intimidating. Um, but maybe that's one of the more rewarding things is that my work life balance. If an outsider were to look at it, they would say you are way out of balance. But for me, it works. You know, I don't require as much sleep as other people. Say, for example, my wife. I don't have to sleep as much as she does. I I really love creating art. And so in my time off, I'm still doing things that are very story keeping esque. But as long as I'm energized, I feel like I have the balance, right?
Yeah. I saw the picture of that hog and I thought, man, that looks really close. I'm sure that had your adrenaline flowing a little bit, huh?
Well, yeah, I was sitting on the ground. Um, I was sitting on the ground and I could hear him before I saw him, and then I could smell him. I mean, he was really uncomfortably close.
When you can smell him, you know you're too close.
Yeah, and thankfully he couldn't smell me, so that was good.
Uh, well, for those that aspire to follow in your footsteps, and I know this industry's grown more than what it was. I mean, to not get too off track, I know that we live in a time where it seems like as a culture, more people are focused on um, themselves. They're focused on, I don't know if the future is the right word, but there's not as much regard, it seems like, to the past. So, but I think because of that, you do have, as time goes on, you have more people recognizing, saying, you know what, something's off here. Like we can't just be focused on ourselves. We can't just be so isolated and not consider what came before us. Looking back at the generations before us, like that makes us who we are. Like we wouldn't be who we are if it weren't for our grandparents, great grandparents, and so on. So, that aside, that was not in my question, but but for someone that does see this and like, man, this is a really cool career path, like how this is being able to tell stories and be able to go and help families preserve these stories of their loved ones. What essential qualities or attributes do you believe are crucial for success in the legacy filmmaking industry?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on persistence. That number one, more than anything, I think persistence is something that you absolutely just have to have in an industry where people, it's not like wedding videos. It's not like every time that somebody gets married, they automatically want to hire somebody to record it, right? People don't think about this. You have to be persistent, and you have to, what has helped me a lot, I think, is having a fairly large network of people that understand who I am and what I'm all about. I think that I've been able to rely on that a lot. I think that has contributed to me being able to pull this thing off. I think humility is a big part of it. Because nobody is going to have room to be able to tell their own story if someone is super into themselves and is only talking about themselves the whole time. You have to keep your yapper shut, and you have to allow other people space to fill that gap, right? Or you're going to have nothing. I think that you have to be fiscally responsible to do this work. I didn't take out a loan for any piece of equipment until the pandemic, when Sony was running a 0% interest deal on a camera that would match mine. I took them up on that, and then I paid it off early. I think that's one way that I've been able to make this work for so long, is because I don't buy anything that I can't afford, and I've scaled slowly, and I paid cash for everything except for that one camera. Um, those things, I think if you have that mix, you're built for longevity, and you're built in a way that creates the space that you need for people to actually trust to engage with you, if that makes any sense.
So you've made a career out of helping others leave their own legacy through film. So looking ahead, what do you hope that your legacy will be as a filmmaker? And how do you aspire to impact both the industry and your audience through your storytelling?
Man, that's a great question. What would my legacy be? I think that if people in the future are even paying attention to legacy films, which I hope that they do, I think that people would recognize that as much as, I guess, me being an isolationist for so long, and crafting the skill set and laying the groundwork for my approach to legacy films, I think that people will see me in that way, um, because later in my career, I did find other people that were doing work similar to me, and I'm biased, right? Like I have my own processes and everything, but all of my processes have gotten to the point that they've gotten to for a reason, and they're built on truth, and they're built on listening to my customers. And so I am grateful, um, for my journey, and the slow journey that it was, and the hard-headed learning that it was. It's all very well grounded, and I think that if anyone were to look back on what I've created, they would see that, okay, this guy, he didn't take an easy road here, but the road that he took was true, and look at where it led him to, right? And look at what he's been able to create for his clients and the people that he serves. And I guess that would be my hope. Like if people were to notice that, that would be awesome. Because and not like, hey, that would be awesome like for me. I think that it would be awesome for the industry, because I don't intend to keep all the knowledge to myself, right? I want I want the legitimate road to be magnified, and I want what is true and what is effective to be put into practice. And like I said earlier, I'm just one guy, and I can only do so much work, and it's important work, and it shouldn't just be me doing it, you know? So from a legacy perspective, I do not want it. I do not want all the knowledge that's up here to go kaput when my body goes kaput. That would be shameful.
Wow. Awesome. That's good. Well, to wrap up, got one final question. What message or piece of advice would you like to share with our listeners, especially those who are navigating their own path to success in the creative industry?
I mean, not to be Shia LaBeouf, but just do it, right? Just do it. Um, if you want to be a filmmaker, you want to be a cameraman, pick up your camera and go shoot something. If you want to be a sound person, get that microphone in front of something. Whatever it is that you want to do, the best way to learn is by actually going out there and doing it. And I think that something that is super popular is, asking the question on the internet and seeing what the internet returns. And I've caught myself doing the same thing. For example, I have my camera, in the bag next to me on the floor. And, where is that setting? What the heck am I doing, searching the internet for it? Why don't I pick up the camera and look at it? The answers are right there at your feet. Oftentimes you just have to start walking and start doing it. And when you learn it yourself, you learn it that much better too. So yeah, I mean, if I could tell anybody anything in the creative industry is just exercise it. Do it early, do it often, do it all the time, and you will get better. It's inevitable. So
Fantastic advice, Clinton. Gosh, this has been good. This has been fun. Thank you for coming on and chatting with me, and yeah, and keep doing what you're doing. You're making a big impact in the world, and I certainly am a fan of what you're doing. So keep it
no,
up.
thank you for the platform, sir. And what you've done is also super important, right? Because there's filmmakers out there that, are operating on an island, much like I did for a long time, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. You can learn from others. So
yes, sir. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it. You
cool.
have a good one.
All right. Adios, sir.